As Eldo flies around to find the ogre nest, he thinks about how he exterminated a lot of ogres, but they'll still be popping up. It is said that if the boss of the ogres is still alive, they'll keep coming. As such, Eldo knows that he must find the nest and wipe out all the ogres, including the boss. Eldo keeps flying when he suddenly spots a group of 3 men also present in the forest. Eldo is glad to see fellow adventurers there, because the more people contributing to the cause, the easier it'll be. Anyway, he moves forward and eventually spots a weird place within the forest. That particular part of the forest was evidently cut off from the main forest, and the trees there were considerably bigger than the normal ones. So, Eldo lands there and uses his invisibility magic to observe. As he does so, Eldo eventually catches a glimpse of ogres. Eldo is sure that these are the same type of ogres as the one he wiped out earlier. The ogre being there pretty much indicated that the nest was somewhere nearby. This was enough information gathering for Eldo, who decides to now head back and prepare for the battle with ogres. However, when he does come back, Eldo sees a huge ruckus going on in the middle of the city. He runs into the guild secretary and asks her what is wrong, to which she just tells him to see it for himself. The 3 folks who Eldo had seen earlier in the forest were here, and they were claiming to be volunteers, carrying out an order to make the people of Elias leave their city. This shocks Eldo, as they continue on and add that this is a direct order from the capital. The order directly tells them to use any type of means necessary to get the people out of the city. In other words, they could do anything, and it wouldn't be punishable. The branch manager was strictly against this, as he says that they can't be doing it. Such a tyrannical order couldn't have been made by the capital. Moreover, the outskirts are full of ogres, so their lives will be in danger if they get out. One of the volunteers tells him that there are no ogres anymore, so they can get out easily. Eldo understands that this happened because he had wiped out all the ogres roaming nearby. Anyway, the guys were telling them to hurry up and get going. Eldo tells the branch manager that they're in quite the pinch. The branch manager agrees, because they had no right to disobey the capital's orders. However, Eldo also points out that asking the people to leave would deeply damage Count Maggis' reputation. Just then, the blonde volunteer yells at them for delaying their departure and starts causing destruction. He slices a barrel full of food in half. This upsetted the people. This was their food reserve, which the Count had given to them. The guy, though, showed no mercy, and arrogantly said that they would have thrown it away anyway, so it was useless. His ego bothered Eldo, who uses his suspension magic skill to cause the blonde guy to launch off in the air and hit his head on a hard surface. This knocks the guy out, but Eldo was kind enough to make sure that he lands safely, to avoid causing serious injuries. This stunned the other volunteer, who questioned what just happened. Eldo steps forward and states that it was his doing, because he could no longer handle the bullcrap they were going on about. The branch manager asks him if he really wants to get involved in this, but Eldo tells him it is fine, because they can't just follow this order. This angered the black-haired volunteer, who steps forward and asks Eldo if he thinks he is special. Eldo humbly answers by saying he is just a mere C-ranked novice. The black-haired guy makes fun of him for this, but Eldo claps back at him, stating how the technique he used on the blonde guy wouldn't work on people above Eldo's own level. So if anything, it meant that the guy there was weaker than Eldo. The guy gets pissed, and warns Eldo to not get overconfident. Eldo says that he is doing nothing but stating facts. Angered, the guy snaps at Eldo, and uses his blade weapon to try and behead him. However, the attack had done nothing, as Eldo's barrier blocked it. Eldo mocks him for being so weak and calling himself a guard. He says that with their strength level, they wouldn't be able to protect the people from ogres. Or well, he doubts they even intended to protect the people. This shocks the guy, as he didn't expect Eldo to see through their plan. Eldo subsequently uses his staff to whack the guy on the head, knocking him out. Eldo declares them to not be strong enough for anything, and tells the remaining volunteer to go and tell their client that Elias doesn't need to be evacuated, and that is because a novice C-ranked adventurer is here to protect them. The guy, scared, runs off and tells Eldo that they'll remember this. Eldo thought that was quite the lame threat though. Following this, the branch manager attends to Eldo. Seeing him, Eldo apologizes for taking things so far. He suggests the manager tell the higher-ups that a random adventurer did this out of his own will. Eldo can't help but find it strange how those volunteers were openly being so villainous. They were supposed to be acting like they were here to save the people. This doesn't sit well with him. Regardless, the branch manager thinks it is his fault that Eldo had to get involved like that. If only he had stood up for his people by himself, things would have been different. Eldo says there's no point in thinking of what-ifs. Moreover, he knows how hard it is to disobey the higher-ups, so he doesn't blame him. More importantly though, Eldo tells him that he has a bad feeling. He goes on about how he thinks this whole evacuating Elias is an elaborate setup. Eldo asks the branch manager if he had ever heard of the artificial monster called the poison monster. The branch manager says that he doesn't know about it. Eldo explains how this poison is buried underground, from where it starts acting. It causes all the ogres and other monsters to become much more ferocious and stronger. Eldo likens it to the way the ogres were suddenly buffed up. He also mentions how it is weird that these volunteers were suddenly trying to evacuate everyone. He feels this was too perfectly timed to not be a part of a larger plan. This shocks the branch manager, who asks if the capital is really trying to harm them like this. Eldo doesn't think so. He doubts that those volunteers were bluffing when they said that they were ordered by the capital. Instead, this was done by someone influential, who dislikes the reign of Count Maggis. It's their way of trying to smear the Count. The branch manager finds this mind-blowing. Eldo further adds that a plan of such a grand scale could only be done by someone powerful. So, he doubts it could be the work of Cardinal Georges. The branch manager is stunned by this. While he knows that the Cardinal doesn't exactly think highly of Count Georges, he doubts he will go that far to smear him. Eldo tells him that it's just his hypothesis, so he should just keep the talk between them, which the branch manager obliges to. In his mind, Eldo wanted to think of everything possible and be prepared for the worst. In BBO, for reference, only people capable of using the magic poison are the ones who are masters of the forbidden arts. In other words, the Garden of Despair. If Cardinal Georges really has a connection to them, the world might really be in danger. Knowing this, Eldo asks the branch manager for a favor. The branch manager is willing to help him with anything. Eldo asks him to introduce Eldo to Count Maggis if possible. The branch manager agrees right away, and tells Eldo that the Count will accept him with open arms. That being said, he reminds Eldo that Cardinal Georges isn't a fan of the Count, so being acquainted with the Count can be dangerous for him. Eldo knows that, but he still wants to meet the Count. He can't just let someone like Georges have his way. The branch manager is happy to know that, and states that everyone, including himself, would be really happy to have him on Count Maggis' side. He says that he will be informing the other guild officials about this, and assures Eldo that they'll accept him warmly too. He also tells Eldo to ask him for anything if he needs help. Hearing this, Eldo asks him to help him by bringing him a ton of oil. The branch manager, taken aback, says that if they gather every bit of oil they have in the city, they might just have enough. However, he asks Eldo why he needs so much oil in the first place. Eldo smiles and confidently declares his intention to burn the forest with it. The branch manager is shocked by this revelation, and asks Eldo if he has gone crazy. Eldo elaborates that by forest, he means to burn down the ogre's nest portion of it. The branch manager thinks that makes more sense, and tells Eldo to wait while he gathers the oil and brings it to him. After a while, the branch manager, with the help of the guild secretary, brings a cart full of barrels containing monster oil. The branch manager tells him that this type of oil is great to burn things, and that it burns things well even in small portions. Eldo is glad to know that, and asks them if they'll help him with putting the oil inside his magic storage. They agree and get to work. As they start pouring it inside the magical storage, they are still taken aback by the fact that it was actually going inside. The guild secretary asks Eldo if the oil will spill out, but he reassures them that it won't. Eldo mentions that he initially wanted to pull all the oil containers inside at once, but felt that pouring the oil like this would be more efficient. Eldo tells them that he can bring out any item he wants from inside the storage, as long as he knows what he wants to bring out. The branch manager and guild secretary are left in awe of his rare abilities. Following the completion of the pouring, Eldo thanks them and tells them that he will be heading out to the forest to burn the nest. This scares the two of them, who warn Eldo about it getting dark and being troublesome. Eldo tells them not to worry, as he has the night vision skill to help him in the dark. In fact, Eldo states that it's better for him at night. That's because ogres usually hunt during the day and rest at night. The branch manager asks him if this is an ambush of sorts. Eldo says that's about right, but also mentions that he is also feeling a bit nervous. They are shocked to know that even Eldo gets nervous, and tells him to take care of himself. Eldo nods before heading off towards the forest. The two of them see him off, and think about how they are dependent on him to get this done. At night, Eldo arrives at the forest, and eventually the location of the nest. There, he spots a few guards out patrolling. As the first part of his plan, he decides to use his demon search magic. This allows him to use X-ray vision to spot the demons. After his search, he could tell that there were dozens of ogres, with the Ogre King being the focal point. After pinpointing their location, Eldo starts the next phase of the plan, and starts pouring the oil all over the nest. Once done encircling it with his oil, he was looking to execute the next step, which was starting the fire. For that, he kicks the guard ogre on the head, dropping it. The guard ogre falls down, and his torch is enough to inflame the forest nest with the help of the oil. Eldo understands that the Elias people weren't kidding when they said that this oil burns well. The whole nest starts burning, as Eldo watched and waited for the ogres to all come running out from the inside. Eldo was glad on how things had gone till then. Not only had he managed to burn the entire nest with relative ease, he didn't even need to use an ounce of mana. So, as the ogres started running out from the nest, he began to put it to use to create some more chaos. Firstly, he uses the sticky bomb magic attack, which causes the ogres to all get stuck to the gluey material of it. Following this, he uses the earth-style enchantment to summon out a huge boulder from the heavens. He then uses the boulder to both crush the ogres that were stuck, and to block their exit from inside the nest. Now only one thing remained for him to do. Just then, the king ogre, pissed off, smashes a portion of the boulder to get out of there. Now it was time for Eldo to pull off the final act of the plan, which was to defeat the king ogre. After this, King Ogre manages to spot Eldo, and it wastes no time to attack him. The king rips off a portion from the tree, and literally uses it like a whip to try and hit Eldo with. Eldo manages to avoid the attack narrowly, but he notices the damage that it had caused to the surroundings as a result. Eldo, though, is still confident because he knows how these monsters tend to fight because of his experience in BBO. That being said, unlike the other monsters from earlier, which tend to attack in patterns, the King Ogre likes to use the environment to fight. The King Ogre shows a great example of just that, as it uses its massive fists to punch the terrain, causing pieces of it and rocks to fly towards Eldo. This attack was sudden and quick, and it caught Eldo off guard. He knew this wasn't going to be easy. Eldo pulls up a barrier, but it still pushes him back and gives him a few scratches as a result. The king doesn't let him rest though, as it throws yet another punch, which causes objects to fly at Eldo. But this time, Eldo manages to handle it better and counter-attack with a fireball magic attack of his own. The attack hits the King Ogre on the head, but doesn't do any damage to it. Seeing this, Eldo is left frustrated. Defeating the King Ogre was tough by itself, but now that it has buffed by the power of the magic poison, it is nigh impossible to damage it with normal attacks. However, Eldo already knew this and came prepared. He starts moving differently according to the situation, but the King Ogre throws another punch, sending stuff flying at him. By now, Eldo had positioned himself better to see them coming at him. And as such, he decides to use his wind gliding technique. Using this, Eldo effortlessly glides past the rocks coming his way, and lands straight at the King Ogre's head. Eldo uses his feet to split open the King Ogre's mouth, which had been caught by surprise. After which, Eldo uses a basic explosion magic to drop explosive enchantments inside the ogre's mouth. As a result, the explosives go inside its body and create a huge blast. This takes out the King Ogre, and allows Eldo to relax on top of the boulder. The King Ogre crashes and burns while Eldo thinks about how despite being exponentially stronger than usual on the outside, the King Ogre was normal on the inside. So, he managed to finish it off by attacking its inner parts. That being said, he only managed to do it because of how big and slow the monster was. A lot of credit also goes to the wind gliding technique, which made him move way faster. As a stake, he managed to avoid the monster's attacks and take it by surprise. However, this technique can't be used everywhere, because it can only move in a linear direction. Eldo breathed a sigh of relief though, because with this, his forest operation had ended. Suddenly, Eldo noticed something strange. Suddenly, a giant magic circle had formed in the sky. Eldo was baffled. He had just defeated the boss, so was a new boss being spawned all of a sudden. His intuition turns out to be right, and his luck wicked. Because what he was facing was no ordinary monster, it was the dangerous Emperor Ogre. And it was way larger and scarier than the King Ogre. Without wasting a moment, the ogre starts coming down from the sky. It was heading towards Eldo, which scared him. The Emperor Ogre eventually lands on the boulder, crushing it in the process. Despite the Emperor Ogre literally crushing the boulder to bits though, it didn't manage to catch its target. Because Eldo had used his superior speed by escaping to one of the tree branches above him. But the Emperor Ogre didn't notice him. Eldo was worried though, because the Emperor Ogre and King Ogre weren't supposed to appear at the same place. He wonders if this is just one of the differences that this world has from the one in BBO. Or was it perhaps the work of the Garden of Despair? If those guys are able to spawn such high-level villains at will, they are truly dangerous. So, Eldo knew that he had to stop them. But before doing that, he knew that he first had to deal with the ugly monster in front of him. Eldo didn't even know what the Emperor Ogre was doing, as it was looking around everywhere cluelessly. Turns out the ogre was actually capable of using the same magic search technique which Eldo uses. The Emperor Ogre uses that to spot Eldo, and immediately launches itself like a spear to attack. Eldo manages to avoid the attack, causing the Emperor Ogre to inflict self-damage. However, this doesn't even faze the monster, as it almost immediately follows it up with a punch thrown at Eldo. Once again, Eldo manages to escape by the barest of margins, leaving the Emperor Ogre confused. However, it once again tracks down Eldo, and attacks him, repeating the pattern of attack and dodging between the two. This continues for a while, until Eldo decides to retaliate with a fence of his own. He uses the flame arrow technique to shoot an arrow at the ogre. The flame arrow, once hit, can cause a monster's entire body to go up in flames. However, the Emperor Ogre just squashes the arrow like it was a mosquito. This shocked Eldo, as he realizes that the Emperor Ogre, like the king from earlier, is buffed up in strength thanks to the monster poison. However, he still believed he could do something by using his vast knowledge of BBO and real battle experience in this world. So, Eldo keeps dancing around the Emperor Ogre, before firing off another flame arrow. Once again, the Emperor just catches and destroys the arrow. However, the flame arrow was a decoy, as Eldo had set up the much powerful flame pillar attack. The flame pillar hits the Emperor Ogre, and seemingly catches it in fire. This satisfies Eldo as he knows that this will buy him some time, even though it might not deal much damage. However, the Emperor Ogre just tanks it like it was nothing, and keeps moving forward. This stuns Eldo, as he wonders if he can even do something against this monster. Suddenly, he remembers that there's something he can do. Although, he also remembers that if he does that, he will miss out on the loot box drop after he finishes off the boss. However, after taking one look at the enraged Emperor Ogre, Eldo understands that if he can't even stay alive, then there would be no point in getting drops. So, he starts executing the mysterious magic technique. The skill in particular was called the Forbidden Curse, Mana Corrosion. This causes a gust of white powder flying towards the Emperor Ogre. Annoyed, the ogre tries to grab it, which causes his body to start disintegrating as a result. Eldo sees the monster suffering and thinks about how mana corrosion is a corruption skill. It allows the user to contaminate the target's mana and destroy it from the inside. There are two reasons why people opt against using this forbidden skill. It is because before using this skill, one must use the magic search to make sure no one else other than the target is around, because it can cause in the area, bar the user to get affected. Furthermore, it is also very rare to get a drop after finishing a monster using this. So, people who used this curse were referred to as trolls in BBO. That being said, this was really the perfect time for Eldo to use this curse. It is a hard counter to the monster poison which strengthens the monster's mana. So, by using this, he can simultaneously suck out both the monster's normal and contaminated mana at once. As the Emperor Ogre starts breaking down, Eldo also notices that the fire was going out too, so he must finish this off quickly. Meanwhile, with the last bit of life it had left, the Emperor Ogre was looking to attack Eldo. Seeing this, Eldo also prepares to finish it off. The Emperor Ogre tries to smash Eldo with a punch, but Eldo's magic is enough to break the Emperor into pieces. The pieces then vaporize into nothingness, allowing Eldo to breathe a sigh of relief after finishing off the job. Afterwards, Eldo extinguishes the fire and collects whatever remnants he could get from the regular and king ogres. After finishing off his collection, he was satisfied with the work. Although there was a tinge of regret of not getting anything from finishing off the Emperor Ogre, he thinks that he has gathered just enough from the other ogres to convince the capital that he has wiped out all ogres. Eldo starts walking out when he suddenly catches a glimpse of a shiny black stone. He recognizes it as the Stone of Wisdom and picks it up. Eldo feels he is quite lucky to pick this up, because usually there are no rare items to pick after using the mana corrosion curse. Anyway, Eldo then turned his attention to the last thing he needed to do. He uses magic search again to find out the location of the monster poison. He goes there and uses the ice pillar technique to destroy the poison. Eldo knew that with this, he was done and that no new monsters would go berserk for now. However, he can't help but worry about how there was no one around to do the summoning, yet still the enemy managed to summon the Emperor Ogre. He wonders if they have a way to automatically summon monsters at will. Suddenly, Eldo felt as if his experience in BBO wouldn't be of much help from now on. But there was no point in thinking about that, so he just decides to head back to Elias. The next morning, the guild secretary was asking the branch manager to wake up, as he had dozed off. She questions how he could sleep like this when Eldo was out there, risking his life for them. He says that he had just fallen asleep now because his eyelids got heavy. Unbeknownst to them, Eldo had arrived and was standing right behind them. He tells them how it is already the morning, to which the branch manager says that he did well staying up for so long. Soon the two of them realize that Eldo had returned, and were shocked to see him. They point out how Eldo was looking rough, to which Eldo says that it's only natural considering he fought in the wilderness. However, the most important thing was that he managed to exterminate all ogres. This makes the two of them happy, and in a moment of joy, both of them jump at Eldo to give him a big fat hug. But Eldo was feeling weak, and ended up collapsing and losing consciousness from all the hard work he had done last night. The next time Eldo wakes up, he finds himself at the Elias Inn. He remembers passing out earlier, so he assumes that he was brought there. The guild secretary attends to him, and informs him how they got worried as he was knocked out for the last 2 days. She then says that she was going to the branch manager to tell him that Eldo has woken up. She also told Eldo that she made food for him, so when he feels hungry, he can come to the guild to have it. After a while, Eldo does feel his stomach growling, so he gets dressed up and arrives at the guild. Once there, the guild secretary greets him warmly, and so does the branch manager. He thanks Eldo for what he had done for them, but before he talks to him more about it, he tells Eldo that someone else wanted to talk first. This is when a man asks Eldo if he is the strong rookie everyone is talking about. The man was none other than Count Maggis himself. Eldo says yes and asks the Count who he is. The Count replies nicely by saying that he is Maggis, the Count of a small and humble region. Eldo mentions how he didn't expect someone as influential as Maggis to come in person to meet Eldo. Maggis mentions that after the city guild reported to him about Eldo's exploits, he couldn't help but come see the man for himself. He also mentions how the branch manager told him about Eldo's want to join their side. In reality, Maggis had always been waiting for someone as special as Eldo. So, he offers Eldo his hand, to work together and put an end to George's reign of terror. Eldo smiles and shakes Maggis' hands, stating Georges to also be an enemy of his. Maggis says he is pleased to have Eldo on board, and has a lot more to talk about. So, he suggests they have that talk over a meal. He mentions how the guild has prepared a proper feast for him, so there shouldn't be any reason why they should ditch that. Eldo agrees and they go to have lunch together. Once there, Eldo is surprised to see all the food that was prepared for him. He says how they weren't kidding when they referred to this as a feast. The guild secretary tells him that there's even more food for him, so he can eat all he wants without a tinge of hesitation. After that, the branch manager mentions how the Count and Eldo are going to talk about a confidential matter, so they should leave. After they leave, Count Maggis starts off the conversation by expressing his gratitude towards Eldo for finishing off all the ogres. He states how he had no idea how to deal with this ogre outbreak. When he heard the news about his first set of volunteers being steamrolled by the ogres, he really lost hope. He looked for other volunteers to start a new campaign against the ogres, but Eldo appeared out of nowhere and did it by himself. So he thanks Eldo for all the hard work, and even though it wasn't an official request, he tells him to accept the reward for completing the task. Eldo checks the box to see it was a stone of wisdom which the Count offered to him as a reward. Eldo asks him if it is really okay for him to keep this. The Count tells him that it is his deserved reward for doing something so good for them, and also adds that the Count himself doesn't know how to use it. He had heard that Eldo was looking for these stones, so he thought it would be a great reward. Furthermore, it also serves as a reward for taking care of George's volunteers and saving the city. After which, the Count cuts to the main point, which was about his animosity with Cardinal Georges. The main reason why the Cardinal hates Count Maggis is because he accepts inferior races in his region. However, that is not the only reason. As the Count was about to tell him the second reason, Eldo asks if the second reason why the Cardinal hates him is because Count Maggis doubts that he has connections to the Garden of Despair. This shocks the Count, who asks Eldo how he is aware of that. Eldo reveals that he had only considered this as a possibility, but it turns out that his hunch was true after all. The Count reveals that it is indeed true, because one of Maggis' men had seen one of George's subordinates coming into contact with a man who bore the crest of the Garden of Despair.